Hello, everyone. As part of our TiE University program, we are delighted to bring you this special workshop where we talk about the legalities of moving from idea to incorporation. Before we start, please make sure to keep yourself muted when the session is going on. We normally do these sessions on webinar format, but we very consciously wanted to keep it interactive for our student audience. So while you have the liberties to communicate freely, I request all of you to be mindful, raise your hands and speak in turns. I want to share a quick thing here before we start. Before I actually started working with TiE Dubai, it's been 2 years and I still love it. I told one of the veteran charter members here that I have this fantastic idea and there is so much that can be done with it. And he, without batting an eyelid, said, "Ideas are plenty, and I'm sure you too will find them in every corner. But it is another ball game to empower it." This has actually stayed with me all through, and I fully realize even today how plentiful ideas are and how very, very few people actually act on it. On that note, on behalf of TiE Dubai, welcome, welcome, welcome. I do hope many of you are here to make sure your ideas do not remain only as ideas. I will not delay the start, but I will quickly wish everyone a happy Women's Day today and every day. To all the women here on our session and to every woman out there, keep rocking. And also remember, we're a team, men and women, so more power to all of us. Very quickly, for all those who don't know much about TiE, TiE is this amazing organization that started in the Silicon Valley in 1992 by a handful of people who actually understood that the journey as successful entrepreneurs is tough but possible. They realized the values of an ecosystem that needed to be created for many more people to begin their entrepreneurial adventure. And here we are today. Again, it started with an idea. It has unlimited power, but when harnessed with effort and work, only then there is value to any idea. TiE is now more than 60 chapters in more than 15 countries. The most amazing part of this organization that it is run on the generosity and passion of many, many successful entrepreneurs who are leaders in their own right. Called as charter members, they are willing to give back their valuable time and knowledge to the entrepreneurial community and ecosystem to build it further. They create time out of their very busy schedules to support aspiring as well as newer entrepreneurs and businesses on their journey and to increase the chances of success. A shout out to all the charter members and especially the ones in the audience now. So, how Tai functions is on 5 main pillars, namely mentoring, networking, education, funding, and incubation. While Tai has a global reach, we make sure we focus on the local ecosystem. There are some great programs which we run for all the entrepreneurs out there. The mentorship program, TiE Women program, TiE University program for the university students. And due to the pandemic, we are able to reach a wider audience. For the TiE University MENA students pitch, this year we have around 15 universities and 40 teams who have applied, out of which one winner gets selected and goes on to compete at the global level for a prize worth $50,000. There is a lot to be learned on the journey as well. You get to be a part of workshops like these and also network with other universities, like-minded students, entrepreneurs, investors, etc. Who knows, one or some of you here may be creators of future unicorns. While there will be a chosen winner, the success story lies in each of you here who are ready today to convert your idea into action. And we are here to help. Moving on, TiE Dubai is the Middle East chapter of TiE, based in the Dubai Internet City, has been around for more than 18 years now. The easiest way to be a part of this community is by liking us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to access all our events and programs. You can find us as TiE Dubai everywhere. I would also like to acknowledge and thank all of TiE Dubai sponsors and partners who continually support us in bringing more to you. Moving on to the session for today, there is no better person to bring you this. Unlike most lawyers, she does not speak legalese. You can actually understand her at the first go. She's none other than Bianca Gracias, partner of the local UAE law firm ICLO. She heads the department that is focused on startups and SMEs. She comes with more than 15 years of experience and believes in genuinely supporting small businesses without designer price tags. Through ICLO, she's extremely active in the startup landscape in UAE through active collaborations with Dubai Development Authority, Founders Institute, Shara, Start Abu Dhabi, Khalifa Fund, Dubai Computer Group, and more prominently as charter member and legal program chair with TiE Dubai. Without further ado, Bianca, please take it away. Just quick instructions. Please keep yourself muted when the session is going on. If you need to ask a question, kindly share it in the chat button or raise your hands. All noisy last benchers will be removed. I was a last bencher, so I do know how it works. Bianca, please.
So welcome to today's presentation on idea to incorporation. If you're here today, then obviously you have had an idea, or you have an idea at the moment, or you're thinking of maybe changing your life path or your career path from actually being an employee to creating your own business for yourself. Now, there could be easily a unicorn or a dragon amongst you. I'm sure everybody's familiar with these terms: unicorn, dragon, etc., etc. This is going to be a very interactive session, as Cicely mentioned at the start of it. So I will require a lot of you to interact. Now, being a lawyer at a law firm in the UAE, I know a lot of you probably think she's obviously has something very intelligent to say. Yes, I agree. I have something really intelligent to share with you today. But more importantly, having a law degree is very similar to having common sense. And today, my objective with today's presentation is to actually get those creative juices flowing. If you have an idea, or you're thinking of incorporating, or you're thinking of becoming the next unicorn or dragon. So expect this session to be interactive. I would like you to get either unmute yourselves and speak one at a time so as not to interrupt any other speakers when they're speaking, or use the chat button if you can. So first, before I start, if I can ask you to come onto the group chat and just type, if you have a great idea, let's assume each of you have a great idea, what do you do next? There's no right or wrong answer here, by the way. I just want you to just say, you've got a great idea. What do you do next? Rutvik says, develop the idea. How would you develop the idea? What are the next steps? Break it down for me. Work on a business plan, says Bobby. Great. Yes, you want to work on a business plan. What else? Create a business plan. Yes. What else would you do? Got this fantastic idea that's going to disrupt the economy, change the world. How are you going to implement it? Yes. Sasan, I hope I got your name right, says, go ahead with implementation. Yes. How? Okay. Sana says, seek ways to foster the idea and ask for mentorship. Great. Make a minimum viable product, says Stephen. Great. Test it. My job is done here, guys. You're giving me great ideas. Start looking at its viability in the market. Yes, it's Hassan. Okay, sorry about that. What else? How else are you, what are your next steps? What are the next steps you would ideally take? Protect the idea via patent. Absolutely. If it can be protected through IP, most definitely you'd want to protect it before you actually disclose it to the whole world. What else? Get the papers. Idea validation, says Haifa. What else? What else are you going to do? I want you to really think about this. Get your creative juices going. You have a great idea. How are you going to implement it? Say you want to make the next magic jam in the world. What are you going to do? Get the funds in caps lock, says Selva. That's great. But what do you do before you get the funds? Why should somebody invest in you? Bobby shares the sentiments and says, show me the money. Bobby, show me the gold. Pitch deck, says Rutvik. That's great. Great ideas. Analysis. Analyze the idea. Use Porter's 5 forces. We've got somebody really intelligent here with us, Jaspreet. Rajiv says, get an angel investor. Great. Any other genius ideas?
maybe you will get a mentor and try to convert the idea as a...
That's very good. Yes, yes. So the next thing you really want to do is you want to convert your idea. You want to see how it's going to be the next best thing. So I put a few points, most of which all the geniuses in the room have covered here, right? A, how are you going to validate the idea? You've got this great idea. How are you going to validate it? In startup terminology, we call it getting proof of concept. So what are you going to do? Say you've got an idea to create this magic jam. When you eat it, it tastes divine. You feel satisfied with it. It's just the best jam in the world. How are you going to get proof of concept that this indeed is magic jam and you can actually monetize it, right? How are you going to monetize your product? You actually have to create a business plan. You have to have a financial plan and know what your financial projections are. Believe it or not, I'm an active mentor in the startup space, and about 80% of the startups I've met don't have a business plan. It's very habibi, inshallah, I will get there. I will, what are you doing next? Okay, I will get the funds. I will, get an angel investor. But if you don't have a business plan, even the investors will not know where you're going, what your financial projections are going to be for the next 5 years. So first, ideally, you should have proof of concept. Maybe share the jam with a few close friends and, see how they feel about it. Next, think about creating a business plan. In the business plan, you will put, who are your competitors? Do an analysis of who your competitors are. Who's your demographic? Who are you really targeting to sell the jam to, for example? And how are you going to make money? It's great to have an idea that will disrupt the economy. But a lot of the startups fail because they just don't know how to monetize that idea. You don't set up a business for charity, unless it's a real charity, of course. But you set up a business because you want to make profit. You want to make business. You want to be the next unicorn, the next dragon. You want to make money. You want to get a good income stream for yourself, right? And the last thing I would recommend to you is at idea stage itself is research the right activity and the licensing options. And now this is a whole Bermuda Triangle, which we need to get to. So next, after that, it comes to structuring your company, right? When it comes to structuring your company, how do you go about structuring your company? The first thing you need to remember is, if you are thinking of making something, say making this magic jam that we spoke about, thinking of making this magic jam and you want to sell it, right? Or you're thinking of providing services as a freelancer. Just remember, if you are planning to sell something, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a product or a service, all commercial activities need a license. Now you may say to yourself, I only have one client or two clients who I provide services to. It doesn't matter. You may sell 50 jams in a month. You need a license. Does anybody dispute that, or anybody needs clarity? Feel welcome, by the way, to post your questions in chat, or if you have any questions or you have any comments, feel welcome to. Now, I don't know if all of you know, you can either license your particular activity or you can incorporate a company. Do you know the difference between the two? Are there any smart Alex in the room who can tell me the difference? No? Please use the chat bar. Or speak.
Yeah. Incorporating a company is once, okay, you have activities going on. If you are ready to go, you have to incorporate the company, necessary licenses, approval, everything. But if you're in idea stage, as you expand, you have to have a business plan, share with your friends, find the customers. So there is a big difference.
What is the difference between licensing your specific activity and incorporating a company? Do you know that there's a difference?
Yes, there is a difference.
A lot of us,
yeah.
A lot of us have heard the... Sorry, Salva, go ahead.
No, licensing means maybe a product or something like that. We have to get the license. Incorporating the companies, registering your financials or your business activities with the government authorities. That's the difference I see.
A lot of us may have heard the term freelancer, or you may have heard of the e-trader license. Yes, Jayan says, like, I can be licensed to be a business coach. Absolutely, Jayan. So you can go to entities like in Dubai, you have TCOM, in Abu Dhabi, you have other entities where you can get a license for your particular activity as an individual. The Dubai Economic Department issues something called the e-trader license that costs about 1,600 dirhams, if I'm not mistaken, where it licenses your activity as an individual. That particular license cannot really get you a visa, for example. It cannot allow you to hire employees. It's just for you. So if you want to perform a service like Jayan says, a business coach, then it licenses your activity, and that's the right way to do it. Now, if you go and incorporate a company, which could be either on Free Zone or Mainland, wherever you go and get a company license, that possibly allows you to sponsor employees, get a partner or investor visa, and you can actually function as a company. Either way, it's ideal to get a license, whether you license your activity or you license the company. I hope everybody's clear with that. If not, just write in the chat bar. Now, if you are a startup and you are waiting for proof of concept, one very important tip that I would share with you is, yes, if you're selling something, you're actually performing a commercial activity, go get yourself licensed. Don't try and perform commercial activities, sell stuff to consumers without actually being licensed. But what I would not recommend you do is don't go ahead and create holding structures and create operational companies and then a holding company somewhere. Don't absorb expenses and operational costs if you don't really need to do so. Wait up until Series A at least, or unless you bring in angel investors beforehand and they're happy to invest money in creating an elaborate structure. And always remember, don't structure your business because that unicorn has that kind of a structure, or somebody has used fancy terminology like, I created an SPV in Delaware. So just because it sounds fancy or it sounds in an exotic destination, don't follow in their shoes. Structure your business based upon your activity, who your demographic is. For example, if you're creating a podcast that's going to be entirely in Arabic, you can't possibly target the United States, so you can't target the United Kingdom. You ideally want to start targeting a demographic which is in this part, in this region. Bobby says, what kind of license? Bobby, let's talk later. Okay, so going on, licensing. Now, this is one of my favorite topics when it comes to licensing your companies. When I speak to startups, entrepreneurs rather, in the idea stage, they come to me and they say, I really want to do this. Can you tell me how I can find a loophole? Now, lawyers are great at finding loopholes. I'm not going to deny that, right? They're great at finding loopholes. But what my first recommendation would be is, don't find the loophole with the objective to avoid the law. For example, somebody I know said, I really want to do yoga. I love yoga. I really want to practice yoga. So she went ahead, bless her, and she set up in a free zone. Right now, as you know, in the free zone, you can only operate within the free zone. And I'll come to explaining that a bit in detail. She set up in the free zone, and then she put together a group of people. And then she went to one of, I think it was Mamzar Park in Dubai, and she had a small class there. Unfortunately for her, the municipality was out that day checking the park. And they fined her. And the fine that she got was 50,000 dirhams. So if you ask me, do not try and avoid the laws, because there are strict penalties for compliance. And what is even more embarrassing is your reputation is on the line. So nobody wants their consumers or their clients to know that they got fined for something. So that could be a huge reputational risk for you. Now, coming to how do you select where you incorporate in the UAE? Let's just talk about the UAE, never mind the other jurisdictions in the world at large, right? We have 7 emirates. In these 7 emirates, we have 50 plus free zones, and we have mainland options. Does everybody understand the difference between free zone and mainland? If there's somebody who doesn't, please pop a message in the chat bar. So I'll spend 2 minutes and explain it to you. Or forever hold your peace. So I trust everybody understands it. Great. I'm speaking to a very educated audience, the kind that I like to speak to. Now, when we incorporate, I have a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me and say, where can I incorporate? And they go, I really want to incorporate. The next thing you know, they've gone off and they found some free zone somewhere and they've said, I incorporated here because they were giving a discount this week. And it was only at 5,000 dirhams, so I've incorporated. That is the worst thing you could ever come up with, or the worst decision you could ever make. The first thing you need to do for yourself is create that business plan. You know, the business plan that we spoke about in the first slide, create that business plan. And after that, you need to look and check for yourself, who's your demographic? What activity do you really require? Don't go for an activity that you're compromising with. Do not compromise. Sure, setting up in the UAE is a little more expensive than it is in Delaware, for example, or setting up an SPV structure or limited liability company in the UK. But remember, if you want to do business in the UAE, then your best bet is to set up an operational company in the UAE with the right activity, so you don't have to step on gray areas, not have to risk any penalties. Creating a business plan also at idea stage helps you understand how much money you'll need, what your runway will be, what your burn rate will be, what your churn rate will be. For those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, these are all startup terminologies that you can look up on the internet. Any questions on licensing? I can move on to the next slide and we can always come up to questions. Other nice things to consider now, for those of you who don't know, the UAE has released very strict anti-money laundering laws. They have also released a lot of regulations relating to the economic substance regulations, ultimate beneficial owners. This is all to combat things like terrorism, black money, money laundering, etc. So it is very, very strict now. And as you also know, the Federal Tax Authority has released the VAT regulations that came into effect in 2018. And the Federal Tax Authority, by the way, has the right to audit any company, whether or not they are registered for VAT. Therefore, it is extremely important, if you have incorporated a company, or if you haven't, that's even worse. If you are conducting commercial activities and accepting money into your personal bank account, you run a huge risk of being flagged by the UAE Central Bank for violation of tax regulations possibly, and anti-money laundering. So your bank has the right to flag any suspicious transactions coming into your account or any account that they hold to the UAE Central Bank, and you could easily come under investigation. If you come under investigation, it will be quite hard for you to come out of it. And trust me when I say, as far as white collar crimes or investigations are, the UAE is extremely thorough. And now it sounds like I'm going down a rabbit hole, but all I want to say in summary is, if you are conducting any commercial activities, please do not take money into your personal bank account. I know two banks, Mashreq Bank and Raq Bank at least, are setting up accounts now for small businesses. Even if you have an e-trader license, they've become quite friendly, and they are setting up bank accounts. So please open a bank account, have all your accounts put into that account to avoid any flagging by the UAE Central Bank or the Federal Tax Authorities. Now, the second thing I want you to consider is, if the amounts are small, of course, below 5,000 dirhams, it's okay to issue just an invoice or a purchase order, have the company issue a purchase order. But if money is coming into your bank account, large sums of money, significantly large, or it's going out, try and make sure you have documents, like ideally an agreement, to back up that transaction. Again, your bank can ask you for these questions. Your bank can say, what is this transaction that's coming into your account? And if you don't have legal documents to back up that transaction, it could be flagged as suspicious. Now, another thing to consider is, if you pair up with your friend and you want to create this magic jam, Bobby's open and willing, I'm sure, to create this magic jam if anybody wants to team up with him. So you want to create this magic jam with 2 or more people. Think about setting up maybe a co-founders agreement or a shareholders agreement between all parties, because it's very important that you agree with your co-founders at the start what the terms are of your relationship, who is going to take care of what, and how each of you are going to function. Remember, once you incorporate the company, It is extremely difficult to get out of it if you don't have 100% agreement with everybody on all the terms of operation in your business. So I've seen many companies just get dissolved because they couldn't work out issues between co-founders or shareholders. So don't let issues between partners kill your idea if you've got a great idea that's going to disrupt the economy. Now, tax obligations. Now, remember one thing, if you are incorporated as a company and you register with the federal tax authority, or you're scared of registering with the federal tax authority for some reason, right? Let me say you meet the threshold, you're making $100,000 a year as your income. Don't avoid tax. Remember that value added tax, 5%, is not paid by you as a business. It's paid by your end consumer. You act as a tax collector. You will collect the money and you will pay it to the government. And then you will ask for a refund if it's a business transaction, right? So don't be scared of VAT. Comply with the law. I get a lot of clients that come to me and say, we're scared of the law. What should we do? Should we register? Shouldn't we register? And my number one advice is always comply with the law. Don't try to avoid tax because you're not the one paying tax. Your end consumer is paying tax. And as a company, you're only collecting it and you have the right to claim a refund. Are there any questions? Let me just look at the chat. What Ritu says, what if the company is online? Ritu, can you elaborate a little more on your question? And Mohan says, could you list out the startup terminology, key performance indicators, risk mitigation that need to be? Yeah, but the problem is, Mohan, we could be here all evening if I start listing out the startup terminologies, but that's a great idea. Maybe we could do a whole session and just talking startup terminologies and have fun with that. Going on to my next slide. Other nice things to consider now, having confidentiality agreements with employees, interns, consultants. Can anyone tell me why I'm recommending having confidentiality agreements? Let's see how smart everyone is in here. Secrecy, yes. To avoid stealing of ideas, yes. What else would a confidentiality agreement have, do you think? Besides protection of companies' private information and avoiding stealing ideas. What else would it have? Non-compete, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, non-compete, non-competition, same thing. Avoid competitors from prying, absolutely. Protect customer details, absolutely. That's part of the company's confidential information, right? What else? What else do you think would be included? Because there's something else I want you to think about it, rack your brains a bit. So in waiver of, yes, lock-in period, data breaches, yes, that's all the same things. So in confidentiality agreements, we have something called restrictive covenants clause. A restrictive covenants clause simply means you are restricted from doing A, B, C, D. Now, the main agreement always covers confidentiality, but the restrictive covenants clause is the most important clause for you as a business owner because you're the one who has that great business idea. You've got this all this customer data. You've got this IP that you're trying to protect, right? So A, you don't want somebody to come in, download that information, take it to a competitor. That's when you put your non-compete clause. Like two of you mentioned in the chat, right? Secondly, you also want to put a non-solicitation clause. Nobody comes in and then solicits either your clients away from you or your employees away from you, right? Then you want to put in something called the non-circumvention clause. Nobody goes behind your back and tries to take away maybe your clients or an idea or adapt your idea, right? And the last thing that you always want to take care of is you want to make sure that you specify in the confidentiality agreement that anything that is created by the employees, interns, consultants, whilst they are in relationship with you, is your property. Be very mindful of this because if you don't mention this, then whatever they create is automatically their property. This is something that you have to be extremely mindful of. And the reason why we say, especially with employees, you have to create a secondary confidentiality agreement is because when you have that separate agreement, you create a separate relationship with them, separate to employment law. So UAE labor law does not apply here. What you can also do, by the way, what we recommend to our clients a lot is when you sign contracts with your customers, you can put in restrictive covenants clauses in with your customers. So they don't then come and hire your employees. They don't ask your employees for information, data, etc., etc. So that's my whole spiel on confidentiality. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about confidentiality. Coming to the company stamp, I was in one of the female entrepreneurship groups once, and I got into a, social media spat with with another entrepreneurs. You know how you can get carried away sometimes because you're passionate about a topic. And she said to me that the company stamp means nothing in this country. It's equivalent to a potato. And I said to her, what are you talking about? A company stamp is possibly the most important thing in a company. Whoever controls the company stamp controls the actual signing authority, if you will, in a company. So if you set up a company and you get a company stamp, if you don't have any employees that you can actually trust, please be very careful to hold the company stamp yourself. Do not give it to anybody else if you don't trust that particular individual. Also, given the pandemic, the blessed pandemic, I thought I'd never mention it in my in this webinar, but here I am mentioning it. I'm trying to keep it as positive as I can. So as the pandemic hit us last year, a lot of startups, particularly, and small and medium-sized businesses were hit really badly because most of them had one stream of income. For example, if they were event planners, they specialized only in weddings. Weddings stopped, events stopped. They had no alternative streams of income. So my recommendation to you, if you have an idea, try to think of alternative streams of income within that particular idea. In the future, when you do your pitch deck and you go to investors, it also shows investors that you have thought about this idea and you have a plan B. So that's always good to have within your idea. Having a reserve fund within your company is a legal requirement. I don't know how many of you already know this. A lot of you are mature business people, so you're obviously thinking, been there, done that, know this. But for you, those of you who are perhaps at idea stage or thinking of incorporating a new company, please remember that 10% of the net profit of the company should ideally be put into something called the reserve fund. And this reserve fund, you can keep putting money in every year up until it reaches the cap of the total share capital in your company. So maybe your share capital is 300,000 dirhams, as mentioned in your articles of association. So you can keep putting in money till it reaches 10% of your net profits, till it reaches. It's a good practice to maintain. The economic departments in the various emirates are not policing this right now, but it is in the law. There is a provision in the law. Now, a contingency fund is different from a reserve fund. A contingency fund, I like to call it the what if fund. What if there's a pandemic? What if there's a typhoon? What if all my employees leave me and go to the competitor? It's a what if fund that kind of saves you on a rainy day. It's very different from a reserve fund. A reserve fund would normally be used to fulfill your daily contractual or other legal obligations when your P&L goes low. But a contingency fund would typically be applied for those what if rainy days. It's good practice. I'm not saying it's at least a contingency fund is not a legal requirement. It's just good practice. So this, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the end of my very vibrant talk. So now I'm going to open it for questions. Feel welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions as well if you so wish to do so. So Jayan says, can I borrow money from a friend in my personal account, of course, without interest, and then use it for business as and when needed? Now you would have to record that particular arrangement, Jayant. You'd have to record it perhaps in an agreement that you were taking the money. That's good practice. And secondly, as and when if at all your bank asks what the money is for, you can then produce that particular agreement, right? And then when you set up your bank account, you can actually record it in your accounts, your balance sheet, as amounts given as a loan, for example. That would be the right practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jan. Reserve fund is considered to be part of equity. Reserve fund, no, it's not considered part of equity. You can feel welcome to unmute yourself, switch on your videos. If you're not shy, and ask questions.
So I'd like to ask a question if that's okay, Bianca. Brilliant presentation, thank you very much. With regards to freelancing, which is quite an easy entry point when you come out of university, a lot of the companies are taking on freelancers instead of giving them proper employment contracts, or at least that's another way of finding a job. But then when you get your basic salary and all the package that comes on board on that, could that take you above the VAT threshold? Do you then have to charge VAT? How does VAT work for freelancers? I mean, I'm assuming it must be there somewhere, but it's strange. So if you're earning more than what, 12,000 dirhams a month or something as a freelancer, you'd have to go for VAT, I'm imagining.
That's a very valid question, Stephen, and thank you for asking it. I'm glad you asked it, actually. So Article 2 of the VAT law, I don't want to bore you. You don't have to stress yourself and think about numbers, but just the second article in the VAT law says that if you are providing commercial services in the country of UAE, then by default, VAT is payable on those services. So if you just look at the second article in the law, that's exactly where it says that if you receive any, they term it consideration under the law. So if you're actually receiving consideration and the place of supply of your services is the UAE, then value-added taxes are payable / chargeable on those particular services. So you can look for definitions of deemed supply, I think, place of supply in the VAT law.
And then just as a follow-up, do free zones count as inside the UAE for VAT? So if you're licensed by a free zone and you are providing a service in the free zone, does VAT apply?
So here's a fun fact. It doesn't matter whether you're an individual, corporate, mainland, or free zone. As long as you're providing services, commercial services that are over the threshold, that match the threshold in the UAE, you can go register yourself. Whether you're an individual, corporate, free zone, non-free zone, you meet the threshold for commercial services, you go and you apply for, because remember, the Federal Tax Authority is different from a licensing authority, very different. So their responsibility is not to go and check whether you're licensed. If you're providing commercial services that's above the VAT threshold, you automatically need to pay them VAT. And the way they find out is if, for example, there are suspicious transactions coming into your account, they get flagged by the UAE Central Bank, there is a chance that they get flagged even to the Federal Tax Authority.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Sajid says, can we incorporate as an LLC without a local Emirati partner, or is this restricted to a small group of activities? This is a very interesting question you have asked, Sajid. Why it's interesting is because, as most of you may know, the UAE has recently released amendments to the UAE Companies Law. And these amendments become valid at the end of March. So you may be asking me this question a little too early, or you may be asking me this question a little too late, depending on how you look at it. So under the amendments to the UAE Companies Law, they have provided for a lot of activities to be 100% licensed without having a local Emirati partner. So this means you can literally now go and incorporate a company and have it 100% in your name on mainland. Now here, there are two things you need to consider here, right? One, there are certain activities called strategic impact activities, which are yet to be defined in further detail, that are exempt from this, which means you will still need a local Emirati agent or a local Emirati sponsor, as we commonly call it. And the second thing that you need to consider is the implementing regulations to these amendments are not yet out. Remember, we have, although this is a federal law, there are 7 emirates in this country, 7 economic departments on mainland, right? Each economic department may have its own separate processes or implementing regulations, or there may be one set of implementing regulations. We will only find out closer to the end of this month. Now, we don't know if they are going to allow the conversion directly from 5149 into 100, because obviously the Emirati partner is going to be disadvantaged, won't they? And that could create a lot of disharmony in the ecosystem. So we have to wait and see what these implementing regulations are going to be and how they're going to allow the transgression or the transmutation of 5149 into 100%. Ask me after March 31st. What is the language for, Francisco says, what is the language for legal procedures and documents in the UAE? Well, Francisco, you can transact in English. If you're signing a shareholders agreement, you can do it in English. But remember, if you have to go to the public notary, for example, or any government department like the UAE courts, it will need to be translated into Arabic, which is the national language of this country. There was one question I missed. Are the fintech regulations, Said Raif asked, are the fintech regulations different for different emirates? I'm not sure about that. That's a very specific question. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe at a future date, TiE Dubai is planning to run a few fintech specific webinars. Check in with us then, and maybe we will be able to answer your question then. Okay, 2001 FRM 2017. Got a fantastic name. Hi, if we open real estate marketing consultancy in UAE, how much does it cost roughly? We just want to promote property from the Philippines into Filipino market here in the UAE. I'm not sure of the actual costs because the actual cost change depending on which emirate you want to incorporate in and which specific activity you will choose. You may choose marketing consultancy, you may choose subscription, you may choose, there's real estate brokerage, which requires obviously a local sponsor at this point in time and a bond. So it really depends. You'll have to go, I would recommend you contact one of the economic departments depending which emirate you want to set up in, and actually ask them for the activities related to your particular transaction. There are so many questions I could ask you relating to that. Any other questions? Did I miss anybody? Feel welcome to open your microphone. Okay, Rajiv says, can an offshore entity deal with resident retail clients based on reverse solicitation? Can an offshore entity deal with resident retail clients based on? So offshore entities cannot do any business in the UAE. Unless you, Rajiv, you meant free zone or you meant free. So there are three types of entities, right? You have mainland, you meant free zone. Okay, great. So free zone companies. So with free zone, you are, if you incorporate in the free zone, you can only function within the territorial geographical borders of that particular free zone. You cannot step outside the free zone. You cannot solicit clients. You can't go outside the free zone and say, hey, Bianca, would you like to come and do business with me? Not allowed. You can only function within that territorial jurisdiction. If somebody, however, finds you on cyberspace or through one of your marketing gimmicks and they come up to you and they say, can I do business with you? That's an entirely different story, and you're entirely allowed to do business with them. You also aren't allowed to have an office location, not even a correspondence address on mainland. You can only have it in that particular free zone. That's a perfect black and white response to you, Rajiv. Sajid says, how do you feel the bankruptcy laws have been amended and which allow startup founders to fail and not to have exit the UAE? Well, Sajid, the implementation of the bankruptcy laws is something that we have to wait and watch. It's all in the legal framework right now. I have not experienced the actual implementation yet, so I can't say I can speak from experience. I can tell you what the black and white version of the law says, but we really have to wait and see how the actual implementation is going to work out in order to comment on it from a practical perspective. Did I miss anybody? Okay. So Hassan says, isn't the competition for university students or graduates? I think Cicely, you can answer that.
Yeah, so they could be a graduate from 2019 or current graduate or postgraduate students. Hassan, hope that answers your question.
So Rajesh asks, how can a HR consultancy company, which is registered in the free zone, cater to mainland clients? Well, Rajesh, you simply cannot, unless the actual client directly approaches you. Now, I would recommend you do everything in cyberspace, but you cannot actively solicit clients. You only have to function in the free zone if you have actually incorporated in the free zone. That's the 100% legal black and white response to that. Anushri says, if we have a manufacturing company in the free zone, can we not sell outside the free zone? You can sell outside the free zone in two circumstances. One, you have a license to distribute on mainland, or two, you have a distributor or a agent. For example, you can also use companies like, you just have to deliver, say, a product to a client. You can use Aramex, DHL, FedEx. They are official, they are legal distributors. Or you have to hire an official distributor. Distributor would be somebody who has a license to be a distributor or an agent to function. If you're based in a free zone, you're manufacturing in there, you can't legally sell onto mainland unless you have either a license to do it yourself or a distributor / agent. Hope that answers your question. Shaukat, I think I've answered that question as well. Can a free zone company? Avish says, please share the link which mentions where we can soon incorporate without a local sponsor, even on the mainland. Well, it's actually the law, the amendment to the law. If you go onto the Ministry of Justice website, I think you could get the law there, or try on the internet, maybe you can get a copy of the law. Or what you can do is you can send an email to Cicely, TiE Dubai at the end of the session, and I can share a copy of the translated version in English with you. So how much the value of the company and how many years at least the business is founded here in UAE to get qualified in IPO? Or what are the qualifications? Oh, this is a very long-winded answer. We'll need to schedule a separate session to get to IPO. IPO is, it depends where you actually want to go IPO, right? There are so many exchanges you could list on. So it's a long-winded and outside the scope of this topic. So I'd be happy to answer it separately for you. Akash says, just curious, how practical is that? Dubai Media City and all agencies are based there. No comment, Akash. Arish says, if we set up a company in DTech, how we move that to mainland later? What are the legalities to be followed for this transition? Well, it's a very interesting question you ask, Avish. Now, here's the thing, right? You can't realistically and logistically move a company, because it's literally like taking Bianca and trying to move Bianca and convert Bianca into Avish. Not possible. You can't convert one entity into another entity with a completely different regulator. And that's one of the things we are waiting to see whether the implementing regulations will allow. Because here's the thing, with your company, say you've incorporated in the DTech, Avish, and you've got a lease agreement there, you've got a bank account set up, it's all associated and linked to your DTech company. That is its peculiar identity, right? So how can you then just transfer it to a different entity? I'm not saying it's not possible, and I'm not saying it can never be done. Let's see if the implementing regulations allow it. If it doesn't, then it doesn't seem practical to me from a black and white legal perspective, but hey, you know, this is the land of miracles. We don't know. Is the Bazel Convention applicable to the free zone area? I'm not sure. It really depends what the transaction is. Whether you're talking about a dispute, you're talking about a simple transaction, what is the circumstances? So we'll have to actually review the actual circumstances to understand whether the Bazel Convention applies and what you're trying to achieve really from its applicability. Can a free zone company sell to a mainland company only 50% owned by a local national? I've answered that question. It's the same answer. Akash, Media City, I've answered that question. Yes, my email was at the end of the presentation, or if you can send an email to TiE Dubai, we will be happy to share my contact details with you. Rajiv, how can you provide exit to investors apart from IPO in UAE markets? Plenty of ways to do that. The most typical ways are through contract, right? How do VCs come in and they exit? Through contract. You either sell it to somebody else or you exit. IPO need not necessarily be the only way you exit. Plenty of other ways to exit. Rajesh just said scrap. Okay. I hope you were not just saying scrap to me. You were just scrapping your own question. Shaukat, the recently announced 100% foreign-owned LLCs, where do I get further information on which licenses are available? You could try asking the economic department, Shaukat, depending on which emirate you're located in. They may not be able to 100% give you that information because the implementing regulations are not yet released. Cicely has given you the email address there of TiE Dubai. Feel welcome to get in touch, ask us any further questions. Just before I get on to the next questions, I want to mention to you that we will be running legal sessions every month on different topics, and we've got exciting topics coming up. They're going to be as exciting and interesting as this one. So please sign up with us and register to attend the other webinars. We are also, maybe for associate members. Cicely, do you have any more information on the TiE clinics or not just yet?
1 second. No, TiE clinics will be announced. Basically, if you can get into our mailing list or follow us on any of the channels, we will be announcing it there. Only thing is TiE clinics is 1-to-1 and it will be limited seats. So it would be just 8 people. Like right now we had 60 plus people coming here. So, and also remember, if you don't turn up, you get blacklisted because you are actually denying somebody the chance. So we will open it and we will share it on email and as well as across all our channels.
So we've got a pool of really great lawyers standing across corporate commercial, disputes, transactional, investment. So if you're interested in getting a one-on-one session, please sign up, send an email. Cicely has put in the email address. Yes, sign up for the clinics and you can save a spot for yourself. The email is tiedubai@tiedubai.org. Stephen, might be a tricky question, but what kind of budget should we be allocating for legal fees? This is for the lawyer, not for the free zone. Believe it or not, Stephen, that is a tricky question, which I get asked all the time. And the one thing that I would say to you when you do develop your business plan, and thank you, Stephen, for bringing it up, do provide for legalese, if you will, or legal fees. I would say anywhere between 20,000 dirhams to 50,000 dirhams. I know it sounds steep, but it really depends on your activity. For example, if you're doing something in the fintech space or the investment space, your legal fees could run really high. If you're doing something in the e-commerce space, for example, that may not be that expensive. So do make provision for legal fees. A lot of the startups that you would have seen that have gone on to become unicorns and dragons and get investments from VCs like Sequoia Capital, etc., are startups that have actually invested in good legal documents and good legal advice. So yes, do make that budget. Now, how much retainership for lawyer or legal counsel here? It really depends what legal requirements you have. Don't just, the one thing I recommend to startups is don't just go off and hire lawyers on a retainership if you don't know what your legal requirements are going to be. If you're going to hire a lawyer on a retainer, make sure you actually use that legal retainer. Otherwise, for example, ICLO, we provide legal services on a fixed fee basis. So you come to me and you say, I want a shareholder agreement. I will say, these are your fees and it's fixed. And you know exactly how much it's going to cost. So try and understand your legal exposure or get fees in advance. Don't feel shy to ask questions before you actually go off and hire lawyers on retainers. I, for one, it's just a personal preference. I don't prefer retainers. So I mean, Bazel, okay, Rajesh, Bazel Convention for import of scrap in a free zone. It's a completely separate discussion. We can have this separately. It's not a problem at all. Yeah, and Cicely, thank you for putting our email there. It's info@iclo.ae. If anybody wants to write into us, we'd be happy to receive your email. Stephen, hi, Bianca, interesting to know what happens to a free zone since 100% ownership will be allowed to mainland licenses. Yes, I think it's a huge step in UAE's economy, and it's geared mostly towards developing a lot of social stability, and also in a step to make it more for UAE to be the #1 for innovation and entrepreneurship. Most of you may or may not know, in February 2020, UAE was ranked the 1st in the region and 4th globally on the Global Entrepreneurship Index by the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. So we could very well be the #1 globally next year, perhaps, if all of us pool our resources together. The UAE is working really hard with a lot of innovative approaches, etc., to make it conducive for people to actually launch their idea here in the UAE, keep their investments here in the UAE. So if you're thinking about an idea, I would say UAE is the best place you could set it up right now because you have so many options to do it. Rajesh says, how different is ADCM company from other free zones? I think, Rajesh, you meant to say ADGM. And ADGM is different because it's a very forward-thinking financial free zone that has been set up in Abu Dhabi, and it follows English laws. And that is what sets it apart from a lot of the other free zones. It's in Al Maria Island, the actual physical buildings, and they're quite plush, and there's little red tape, and they're quite easy to deal with. So I would definitely recommend ADGM if you're thinking of setting up an SPV particularly. We've had great experiences with them. Jaspreet says, hi, a few minutes back you said free zone can get themselves licensed to distribute. Where do they have to go? So if you, yes, you can get a license to distribute, but your free zone company will not get a license to distribute. Remember that you will need to go and incorporate on mainland in order to get that distribution license. So if you've incorporated an Ajman free zone, you'll have to go to the Ajman economic department and inquire with them to get either a license to distribute or get an agent in that case. Rajiv says, is there a TiE Abu Dhabi, Sicily?
Not yet. No, we actually will open a little more and try to be present because we do have inquiries coming in from there. But we are here for the region. We reach out to the MENA region with all our activities. So just because it's called Dubai, don't stay away. And we're 1 minute away. Bianca, you'll have to choose the last question, 2 questions before we...
Can I poke in with that, Bianca?
Yes, Raju.
Okay, so see, all of us have local companies here with a 51% local sponsor, right? And but then we being expats at some point will make an exit, right? We will divest and exit. Now the divestment part, the ability to divest, can it be incorporated in the memorandum itself to say that the 49% partner can do it? Or does it have to be on a power of attorney? Or is there a law against the MOA? Or I just want to understand this from you.
Give me a little more understanding.
So basically, if I want to sell the company,
yeah,
and I'm the 49% partner, I want to sell the company, can I say in the MOA that I'm authorized to do that?
You can say that. However, remember that if you actually want to sell it, you need that 51% shareholder to be there with you.
Sure, I get that.
Yeah, as you can say it, say it. But if at all there is a dispute, you'd have to go and enforce it before the applicable forum that you've agreed to in the agreement. You can definitely say it, but there is no chance, there is no 100% guarantee that the other party would agree. Things change.
In which case a power of attorney works better, is that correct?
A power of attorney can be revoked.
Can be revoked.
Can be revoked. There is no such thing as an irrevocable power of attorney, just to clarify. So whilst you can take a power of attorney, the sponsor or the other shareholder has the right to revoke it.
Okay. Okay, I'll talk to you separately. We may need to discuss this. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending. Cicely, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, we can do a last question, and if whoever is here can do a quick response to the survey. Maybe you could pick one last question while...
Okay, does anybody want to open their mic, feeling adventurous to ask me a question?
Yeah, mic and video and close it, probably. Nobody's adventurous.
No backbenchers here, right?
Right.
Can I steal Mahmoud's question? Because it applies to one of my students as well. For an online platform that people buy and sell on it, do we register to a free zone or a mainland? There's a lot of ideas from the students that we've got who are coming up with this kind of thing. Something like a Bazel or a Mento or one of these type of online platforms where like, even using Instagram to do like clothes shopping and clothes selling and things like this. What would your advice be there?
So my advice would be, Stephen, for your client, the startup owner, to actually see who is their demographic, what do they want to sell, and if in the future, do they ever foresee doing anything on mainland? For example, do they foresee having an event? Do they foresee meeting clients on mainland? If the answer to that is yes, go get a mainland license and avoid yourself the grief of having to think whether you're in a gray area, black area, etc. And now that the activities are opening up, it's going to be so much more easier.
So it's about where you're going to market. So if you host a kind of a promotional event on the mainland, you should be incorporated on the mainland to promote the website.
Absolutely, in order to avoid any penalties.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.